Hello everyone and welcome to this week's edition of Worst Politicians in the UK. This week it's been really busy in politics and a lot of that is to do with Boris Johnson, and he's up this week. Remember to check out the other videos in this series on the playlist. So, Boris de Pfeffel Johnson, or Bojo, is, as the time of the recording of this video, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He's managed to bumble his way into the top political office in the country by whipping up populism, deception, and appealing to the British electorate's deference for a posh, bumbling fool. Johnson, of course, comes from a privileged background. Family connections managed to get him a job at a national newspaper, but he was soon dismissed for writing falsehoods. He then moved to the Daily Mail because an old buddy from university helped him get a job. A conservative newspaper, Johnson was a good fit there. He'd be sent to the EU and repeatedly reported falsehoods to whip up the Mail's readers, fake news 90s style. Boris would contemplate standing as a member of the European Parliament, and then finally ran for a position in the UK Parliament. He had little to no chance of winning this safe Labour constituency and lost heavily. Then in 1995, a recording of a conversation he had with a friend who was being investigated for criminal activities was released. His friend had asked for the address of one of Boris's colleagues who was investigating his criminal activities, so that he could have the guy beaten up. Boris gave his criminal friend the investigator's address. Unbelievably, there were no consequences for Johnson. Boris would eventually find a safe seat and become a Member of Parliament. Continuing to write for a newspaper and other publications, Boris would find himself being invited to host a satirical panel show, Have I Got News for You? This boosted Boris's public persona, and he became one of the most well-known MPs in the country. Johnson used his newfound fame to keep his public profile high. The Conservative Party and his other employers would use this notoriety and promote him. It also stopped him from being dismissed for lies and embarrassing behaviour. In 2008, he became Mayor of London, many voting for him because they thought he was entertaining rather than any of his serious policies. He was even backed by the fascist BNP party, who encouraged their supporters to vote for him, probably because of out-of-date racist comments made in his past. Maybe they saw a fellow traveller. While Mayor, Boris was concerned about his paltry £140,000 a year salary, so continued to write for the newspapers. His team were worried he would seem greedy, surprisingly, so asked that he donate some of his income to charity. Boris resented this and never paid what he had committed to. Boris would go on offending people by using borderline racist and sexist comments, as well as comparing the European Union to Hitler and Napoleon's attempts to unify Europe. Are you seeing a pattern here? He lasted 2 terms as London's mayor, after which he decided to return to Parliament because he smelt blood as the Prime Minister David Cameron was struggling. In 2016, the Brexit campaign kick-started, and after some deliberation he decided to campaign on the pro-Brexit side. He managed to be accused of racist comments again when he said that Barack Obama, the then US president, had said Brexit was a bad idea because he had a Kenyan family and therefore was anti-British because of colonialism. Boris acts like a politician from the 50s rather than the 21st century. Not only had he made offensive comments again, but Boris was also caught out lying again. He had said that the EU was going to add Turkey to the European Union, which stirred up fears of immigration. However, after the Brexit vote, he denied saying this. It was totally untrue that Turkey was going to join the Union. Obviously, Boris knew this and said it anyway to drum up fear. Boris also declared that if the UK voted to leave, it would be its Independence Day. Another lie. And the UK is still a sovereign country, it's just a member of the European Union. It seemed not content with stirring up racism, he went on for a lie to stir up nationalism as well. After the UK voted to leave the EU, the PM's position was up for grabs. Boris ran but lost out after his ally Michael Gove stabbed him in the back, such as Tory politics. The posh kids never really move on from their childish college politics days. The new PM, Theresa May, appointed Boris Foreign Secretary. Despite worrying that Turkey was a threat if it joined the EU on a visit as Foreign Secretary, he said that he'd help the Turks join the EU. Boris also supported the Saudis and refused to stop selling them arms, even when the Saudis were shown to be using those weapons in atrocities. He also attempted to prevent investigations into these atrocities. As usual, he was shown to be disingenuous. Johnson was later heard to say that the Saudis were just as bad as the Iranians in stirring up proxy wars and causing instability in the region. But apparently, selling them arms was fine. Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, a British Iranian citizen who went to visit relatives in Iran, was arrested by Iranian authorities for plotting to overthrow the Iranian government. The UK was fighting for her release on the basis that she was only going to see relatives. Then, Boris made this nearly impossible by telling a committee that she was in Iran to teach journalism. This wasn't true, and the blunder means that the Iranians still have Nazanin in prison to this day. People may have thought his blundering was funny, but Boris's mistakes, when in major positions of authority, can have exceedingly dark consequences. When in Myanmar, Johnson started to recite a colonial-era poem about British Burma, with parts like "Come back, you British soldier." Needless to say, the British ambassador was shocked at the inappropriateness of this and reprimanded Boris for it.
Little bells, they say.
We've got one bell.
Come you back, you English soldier.
It is over there.
You remember that too?
So probably not a good idea. What, the Rage Mandalay? No, not appropriate.
Next, Turkey invaded northern Syria to displace the Kurds from a city near the border. The Kurdish forces in the area are part of a democratic movement and one of the great hopes for the region, also being the most effective fighting force against ISIS. But Boris sided with the Turks, whose administration is practically a dictatorship, with a record of repressing the Kurdish population. More imperialist rubbish from this great buffoon. Johnson would resign as foreign minister after he disagreed with the government's Brexit strategy. He has been heard to say that causing chaos would get good results. I'm sure for a rich idiot like Johnson, this wouldn't affect him much, but what about the majority of people he's supposed to represent? Boris would go on to replace Theresa May and become the second unelected Prime Minister of the United Kingdom for this term. He would purge the cabinet and replace it with his cronies and fellow travellers, much like when he was Mayor of London. He lost his working majority in the House of Commons. Some Conservatives couldn't stomach his leadership and left the party. Since then, he's suspended Parliament in what seemed like a way to ram through his own version of Brexit without giving Parliament the right to vote for it. But that decision was taken to the High Court, and unsurprisingly it's been declared illegal, so Parliament is back, but there are still fears he will try and get his own version of Brexit through without consulting Parliament properly. And at the moment he's also under investigation for allegedly giving inappropriate access to public funds for one of his chums. Now you can see from all this, Boris is a lying buffoon, with delusions of grandeur informed by colonial-era Britain. You only have to watch his series on Rome to see the gushing admiration for emperors of old. A greedy, entitled, egotist liar, the king of fools. Many thought that Johnson's behaviour was funny, and that's why they voted for him. He also whipped up nationalists and sinister aspects of British society from the earliest days of his career. We can see these sinister aspects of society gaining confidence and becoming more visible in public. These simpletons don't seem to realise how Boris's actions have real-world consequences, just as Nazanin, who's stuck in a cell in Iran, demonstrates. This is the real world. Wake up and realise you've been conned. And remember to like, comment and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Good luck to everyone. Hold on tight. The Nutters are in charge.